don't forget to post the link to Facebook.
All right, we are back. It's been a little bit, and apparently we're not quite in it. Steven, what are we doing over there?
Oh, hello there, John. I didn't
catch you doing
quite
some
see you.
Light reading?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are live with Out of the Box Politics.
Yep, there we go. And on our new day, which maybe will change. Stay tuned at the end of the show. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Well,
but
I'm sorry.
More importantly, in our new temporary studio.
Yeah, we are in a new undisclosed location, and I understand our previous location also undisclosed. This one's new, also
but more
undisclosed.
undisclosed.
Less disclosed than previously.
Alrighty, so I figured this week we could kind of start with an article discussing opioid overdoses, and then kind of let that evolve into something beyond there. And by the way, if you're checking in on the YouTube channel, feel free to comment stuff. We'll throw that into this discussion. I think that still works the same way on YouTube as Facebook.
Yeah, I'm going to be trying to keep track of live comments. We may not catch them immediately, but I'm keeping
on there.
an
And
eye
by the
on
way,
it.
if you're
So
checking in
if you got
on
something you want
the
us
YouTube
to
channel,
see
feel
or
free to
talk
comment
about,
stuff.
You can throw it on there.
Throw
or
that
just
into
whatever you
this
want to throw
discussion.
on. We'll,
I think that still works the same way on YouTube as Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be trying to
So
keep track of live
the
comments.
story
We
that
may
we're
not catch
talking
them
about, and
immediately,
this
but I'm
was
keeping
spawned
an eye on it.
from
Checking in
on the YouTube political debate that we were having in a closed group with myself and Jason. And the debate was about there is a town in Ohio, I believe. And this was spawned from that is considering a 3-strike rule for opioid. So if you do heroin and overdose 3 times, on the 3rd time they will stop answering. Like if you call in to 911 and say, "Oh my God, I'm overdosing," or "My friend's overdosing, can you come help him?" They'll hang up on heroin and not give you medical care. But they will stop. Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is John, the article is a little bit not great.
I'm assuming, because the other thing is, my understanding is that right now there's a plan, so maybe that's part of the reason it's a little wishy-washy, but my understanding from the article I read is that the first time,
that's what I was gonna say. John, the article's
come save you, you'll be good to go. I'm assuming, because the other thing about that, second time.
Well, I think they always bill you, but whether or not you pay.
And I guess it means there's no restrictions beyond just having to pay. The second time you get a community service. I'm assuming about that charge, I guess, to help pay for whether or not you pay. And I guess it means an epidemic that they're experiencing. They're saying that just in 2016 it cost $11,000, 2016 projected to go, or sorry, 2017 projected to be like $30,000, and 2017 they're looking at like $45,000. So their whole point, it seems like, is to try to minimize that cost. And then they're saying on the 3rd time, or if you've not done your community service, on the 3rd time, if you've not done it, they will hang up on you. And then I guess after the 3rd time, they might just hang up on you regardless. And it seems like, to me, I get where they're going with it, but it seems like you should never have where, no matter what you do, you just hit them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm never really comfortable saying that the government is just saying, well, sorry, you're going to die. Even though we could do something, we're not gonna. But especially saying you can pay off what we've considered the debt that you would owe us as a society for the cost I'm never really comfortable saying service, and then say, well, still fund it. You know what I mean?
And this is, I've heard this argument before from my family, talking about people underprivileged, usually racial minorities, going to the hospital and getting treatment at the hospital because they don't have medical insurance, and they can't pay for the hospital treatment, so they just don't. And that was always my mom's thing. Is like, that's the biggest problem facing society right there, is going to the hospital, taking advantage of that, and jacking our taxes up because they don't have medical insurance. Now,
I mean,
for the hospital treatment,
that's the kind of thing I get. I guess the argument, but it seems like, as is the case with this Ohio thing, there's a more fundamental problem you need to address, and that's the problem. And I get, as a small town in Ohio, you can't single-handedly turn the tide against heroin. Great. That's the kind of thing. Maybe they could have a little bit more progressive programs. But it's the same thing with healthcare, where the reason people don't have health insurance is because it's so expensive. It's so expensive because a lot of people don't have it, so they're having to subsidize the cost. Don't. Maybe they could have it with people who are paying.
Kind of a chicken and the egg type of thing.
Right, that's where you end up with like $100 Tylenol, stuff like that, where we open like a high so that we can negotiate to try to recoup some of the costs of the people who were not able to pay for their treatment.
Which, as we talked before, that's kind of the issue with insurance in the first place, is that they have to negotiate with those insurance companies who are not always willing to pay. So they end up jacking the rates up.
And then just hoping to see what they can get, kind of thing. And that becomes then more and more exclusive to who can afford it, who's then are either forced to subsidize the cost of people who can't afford it. In the case of like a hospital, you have the obligation to treat you when it's like threatening or whatever. Or it means that now you can just not get treatment if you don't have insurance, and insurance is saying they're expensive, forced to do. And that just is one of those where, like, you need, it's obviously very difficult as a society to hard reset to anything. But that, I think, is sort of the intention behind getting everyone like that universal health care, is that it's much easier to distribute those costs, and that's just one of those people paying in than when you have, whatever number of uninsured Americans who, you never know what's going to happen. Even if you're perfectly healthy, you just slip and fall, break a leg, you got to get something done, and it can be very expensive.
Now, why don't you go ahead and give me your opinion on what you think of the controversial law that is being proposed?
I think in its current form, to my understanding, it's more of a statement and less of a thing that they'll be allowed to do, and not a thing they should do. But I think it's not the worst way to open up that conversation about, because I guess the problem in a lot of people's eyes that I've seen looking at it more of a statement. It's the classic, you're kind of reducing people's lives down to numbers, right? I think it just costs too much to keep this person alive, which is ironically, because related to that death panel thing everyone said was going to happen. But this is kind of on the opposite end, it seems like. And that's not great. But I think there is a way to say, like, look, this is costing us, like, it's dramatically, you know what I mean? It's kind of like when some fire departments happen, we don't have enough money to keep going, so we're going to start doing where you don't pay for your county fire tax or whatever it is. We're not going to come to your house. We'll come and watch it burn down. And it sounds insane, but then there is the reality at a certain point where we will literally be under next month. We need money, but cannot do this. And while it might not be that point for this town, when you see it on the horizon, I can see you wanting to take steps. I think this is just a very drastic step, but then there is the reality.
The federal government would subsidize that in some part,
Well, and another thing that's almost definitely related is my understanding of Narcan is very limited, and I don't know everything about it, but there was a company, I think, that got the government bid for supplying, I guess, anywhere that government money would be buying Narcan, and they jacked up their rates like 100 times, 10 times, 50 times. So when you talk about going from whatever I said earlier, like 11,000 or 30,000, part of that might just be that Narcan costs more. And that's another fundamental problem you have to address, but you can't, as the local government of a town, go to the pharmaceutical company and just say, hey, we want to pay less. You can go to the people who are part of that, having their life threatened by this, and say, and that's another problem, you'll pay us, or do the community service or whatever.
Again, the way to fix all these issues is if you triage it to the very most important things. What this really boils down to is the pharmaceutical companies, in some part at least, the pharmaceutical companies having a monopoly and being able to do whatever the fuck they want, because they're pumping so much money into politicians' pockets. Really not.
And there's an argument to be made that it may not exclusively rest on the shoulders of pharmaceutical companies, but the rampant overprescribing of opiates is at least a big factor in this problem. And it's not a problem that anyone's bringing to the pharmaceutical companies saying you need to help us pay for it. It's the same thing as environmental disasters, right? Like, it never goes back to the people who caused the problem. It goes back to the people you can get to fix the problem or get to help you kind of try, because they're just so big and they wield a decent amount of power. So
see, for me, this particular issue is like a slippery slope type of thing. So my big issue with it is, at what point can you distinctly find certain healthcare issues and say, okay, for this one you're going to have to pay out of pocket, even if you have insurance or whatever. So, like, let's say obesity. That's the same as heroin in that it's a life choice that you choose to overeat and have these patterns of unhealthy behavior.
It's not, to be clear for anybody who may have a problem with it, we're not talking about people who are a little bit overweight. We're talking about like TLC style heroin. I can't get out of my house. Like when you get to that level, there is a calorie in, calorie out fat unhealthy behavior. It's not unhealthy, to be clear for anybody.
But let's say smoking, for example. That's probably a better one. You choose to partake in this unhealthy habit, so you go to the hospital, you have emphysema, they will not answer your phone calls, but if we're doing budget cuts and they keep not having enough money, then maybe they'll say, it worked for the heroin thing, let's cut some for the smoking, and then let's cut some for people with heart disease, and then you have a fuck ton of dead people. people, like a lot.
Well, and to be fair, I think there's a degree to which that's already the case, right? Like, because the thing that I guess separates the things you're talking about from heroin is
with heart disease
or a heroin overdose rather, is that the heroin overdose is a right now problem that can be solved right now. So it is literally, are you choosing to save this person's life or not?
Yeah.
Whereas when you start talking about emphysema and maybe not obesity, like heart disease, there are treatments that are available to people who have one.
Yeah.
I mean, flat out, and the hospital is not going to foot the bill and say this is the most cutting edge. We're going to fly you out to this other hospital. They have a great program that you start taking care of. They're just not going to do that. They're going to say this is what we have to do to like be doing something. It costs us the least, and you can't afford it. So we're not going to go out on a limb just to keep you alive. And that's, I think, already in a gray area, right? Where you're saying some people just have access to better options that are more likely to help them more than other people. Whereas with Narcan, it's very much on or off, and I think that's why it's so easy to focus on it.
Yeah.
Because you're literally condemning this person to death right now. Whereas with a smoker, you might be saying, well, we're not going to die today, you're not going to die next week, but you're not going to live the 30 years you could if we did anything that's very expensive.
And under the American Health Care Act, now conditions like obesity, like being a smoker, like having a mental illness, those are pre-existing conditions, and they can jack your insurance rates so high that you can never, ever afford to pay for it. So essentially, they're not insured. They have to insure you, but they can jack your insurance rates through the roof.
Whatever they want, yeah.
Which,
I mean, it's not unfair to say that,
they can jack your
as has been the case
so
for
high
as long as
that you
insurance
can never,
companies
ever afford to pay for it. So essentially, they're not insured.
You pay higher based on your risk factors, right? Like when you're a younger driver or a younger male driver, you pay more for car insurance because you're more likely to use it. And, you know, obviously, we don't all pay the same. Some people are more likely to have problems. With healthcare, it becomes different because you have to be alive and you need to get, you know, if you want to get insurance, there's only so much you can change. And I think the real problem is people coming into health insurance after not having had it for the first 30 years of life, 35. If you smoked for the first 30 years of your life, you have higher risk factors. You know, you could have quit 5 years ago. There's only so much. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter for the insurance company's metrics when you're going through the tables of how long you know you're going to make it and how likely you are to need a lot of money from them.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, that's tough, right? Because I'd want to say everyone should be able to care, everyone should be able to afford it. It's just companies' metrics to figure out what constitutes a decision like past that shouldn't affect your current, and whether or not that's going to have. I don't know.
Well, and also part of the way that they subsidize that, because like being an older person, obviously you have more risk factors because you just at some point the parts wear out. You know? So the part of the way that they would subsidize that and offset the cost is with Medicaid. And also, right, now under the new American Health Care Act, billions are being taken out of Medicaid. So I mean, that's not going to help.
When the other way you balance that is by including people in like the pool of payers who are like unlikely to need it. Right? Like that's the whole idea with having universal health care that everyone pays into.
That's not going to help.
When the other way you need to balance that is by, but they can pay less because we've got 15-year-olds or 18-years-olds and you're paying probably aren't going to need a lung transplant. You know, like they might have a minor thing, but they're paying a little more than they're going to use. The idea being, it feels like you're paying for someone right now, right? But in a balanced, like stable system, you're paying for yourself. And they probably aren't going to need a health savings account.
It'd be very much like Social Security, where you
but
pay
people don't trust it because Social Security is already having problems as we've been hearing for the last forever. And healthcare in the last, like we just switched over pretty drastically to Obamacare, and now that's very much like box. It's like, well, what am I paying? But people don't trust it because as someone who is on Obamacare, I haven't had any major medical anything. I've been paying way more than I was when I didn't have insurance. And if that's going to go away, then it's like, what the fuck did I pay for 2 or 3 years for to not use? Like, because the idea was I was going to have it, right? But I mean, that's what it feels like. Well, okay, never mind.
So we do have the American Health Care thing, and we will talk about it a bit more moving on. I wanted to read the bill in its entirety because I've seen stuff to the left, stuff to the right.
Right, but I mean,
saying either it's good or bad, and there's no way for me to tell. We do have, because there's a lot of misleading statistics and charts and all that type of stuff. So there's no way for me to really tell entirety because I read into it. So I plan to do that, and hopefully we can discuss it. We know if it's going to be implemented.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing is that a lot of what I found the last time when we talk about what Democrats are saying about the bill, the one that never got voted on, right? It got stayed because they thought it was going to be through whatever. Well, and that's the other thing is what the Democrats are talking about is just the scope of what that bill was, the one we talk about today, what Democrats are saying about the work. And then when you talk to Republicans, they're talking about this three-pronged plan that has multiple facets and whatever, and the end result is what we're talking about. So that's like this weird place where you can both be talking about the same idea with very different opinions on even just numbers of what's going to happen. Because Democrats are saying, well, when you do this many people are going to lose health care. And Republicans are effectively saying, right, but when we do these other three things, then it'll balance out. Very different opinions on that's tricky and also a bad plan in my opinion. Democrats can't. Well, when you do this, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? I don't want to trust my health care to that. We're like, oh, if one factor doesn't work, it kind of falls apart, and now everything's fucked, and you don't have the thing you had, and you don't have the thing we wanted you to have. Tricky and also a bad plan. I think they just really needed to come up with a plan, and they did it the best, like the fastest they could. I don't want to trust my health care to that.
But
it's not the kind of thing you do overnight.
That is why it is so important to be able to have political dialogue with other people. What do you think, John?
I think that would be nice.
You like that segue? That's pretty good. So the reason, what we're actually going to be talking about today is when we were having that discussion about the heroin epidemic, Jason came out and said, and I won't throw too much of this shit out. You like that segue? That's pretty good. So the reason, what we're actually but his point is that he's not totally against it because he doesn't want to have to pay for people's to subsidize people's drug habits, which I get, and that's fine. But the actual discussion essentially devolves into name calling very, very quickly. I got called a bunch of names, even though I was agreeing with the people calling the names.
Not hard enough, so.
I guess so.
You didn't have your armband on, you weren't saluting right.
Yeah. So essentially it devolved into Jason would make a point, and then someone would say fuck names, even though I was
a good counterpoint.
Yeah, and then Jason would make another point. I guess so. And she would say fuck you.
You didn't have your armband on, you weren't saluting right.
It was so frustrating to me, and I tried to have a conversation with this girl and say, Jason, look, no, and then we are trying to have a conversation about politics, and then Jason, if you're not willing to listen to someone's point, you just say fuck you, then how do we ever, like, how are you going to change his mind like that? I disagree with him, so what I did was gave specific examples, went in and debunked his logic line by line, and said, at what point does it stop? And then how do we ever care to do? How are you going to change his mind?
Yeah, you didn't say fuck you.
Exactly.
So I should have said fuck you to her. I guess we got the secret handshake.
So that's really a part of a bigger problem. This kind of ties into another major news story that I wanted to talk about, which was the Anita Sarkeesian news story coming out of VidCon, where Anita Sarkeesian is a feminist. She's a political activist, and this kind of ties into another major French-Canadian candidate. And Anita Sarkeesian news story coming out of VidCon. So she was at a panel and just looked at one guy who disagreed with her. Now, I think the premise...
Well, to give it a little more context, just because this is my it leads into the point I want to make about it, is that she was doing the Q&A aspect of the panel, is my understanding, and the person asking the question didn't necessarily ask the question now, I think super inflammatory, but I think she's been on the other end of exactly where she thought he was going, and became defensive, and then picked out a random guy who she feels like is attacking that line, and calls him human, and like this kind of attacks I expect. She's this person, shithead. Yeah. I mean, not in the context, but it's kind of but and that I think was the issue, right? Because then a bunch of people freaked out, and like, well, because she was there to talk about bullying, her feeling like she's been harassed and bullied online.
I mean, about harassment, which is exactly what that is. The guy said nothing to her. She's standing there, and she's like, "Fuck that guy, he's a shithead." It's like, what are you doing? Is the irony lost on you right now?
Her feeling, well, and that's what I wanted to about harassment, which is something I've experienced online.
Said nothing to her.
Something we've talked about, right? Is that balkanization, that echo chamber.
Listen to us with our first world problems. People yelled at me online. Okay, we're gonna do a podcast. We're gonna do a podcast about it.
I don't like it at all. But where I think you hit this point where, because she talked about, I guess in a previous panel or a previous day, whatever, that she people yell not a matter of just
we're gonna do a podcast. We're gonna do a podcast about it
every day. I guess she's a famous YouTuber. Totally.
She's not a YouTuber. She's a blogger, but she's like, as far as I can understand, she's kind of the face for
right. But she's well known, so she gets like every day. It's not necessarily like death threats, but it's like just you suck. You're alive. This is why I think you're a piece of shit. Whatever.
Which is,
and it adds up, right? It kind of weighs on you, I can imagine. So I think there is an amount, because it's something I've seen online. Like, but she's well known, where you don't even have to necessarily pull the same trigger that a more offensive comment would, and you can actually be commenting in earnest to have a discussion, but people feel immediately on that back foot, and then it's just way easier to jump right back to 100 with the previous person. You know, it's like in a relationship, right? And if you fighting a whole lot, having problems, you decide to take a break for like a week. Come back. It might be all right for that first little bit, and then
until he forgets to twist
trash,
tie the loaf of bread
and
again.
Then it's fucking right back at 100.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I think happens with that. And I think it's exacerbated by being online, right? Because it's a faceless enemy.
Well, just the fact there's no forgetting to twist tie the loaf of bread again.
But on top of that, just the fact that maybe I've had someone else bait me into a conversation that ended poorly for me, or I got flamed or whatever. The next time I feel like that's happening, I'm just
well, just the fact there's no forgetting to twist tie the loaf of bread again.
And it's frustrating as a person who's been perceived as doing that. Not obviously, I'm sure, as much as it sucks to be harassed, but where it's like I actually want to have this discussion and not be inflammatory. I'm not here to like trick you into saying something and then laugh at you. Like I'm just kind of trying to figure out why you disagree with this part of this that I agree with. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Exactly. And there is something to that that's in that same group that I was discussing. The first post that I came in on were a bunch of people jumping down a dude's throat, and I would say, "Hey, I've read this, and it seems like you didn't really say anything all that wrong." And I did that about 3 times with 3 different people, and every single time the response is, "Yeah, but you didn't see the shit he posted earlier."
Right.
Like this guy's definitely a racist, definitely a fucking Nazi, all this type of bullshit. And I'm like, wrong? And I have the context of knowing what he said earlier, so I'd like to hear what he has to say.
And that I think plays into that, where there's
like this guy's
especially in like a
definitely a
group,
racist,
with like
definitely
fans of
fucking Nazi,
band or like a Reddit subreddit. There's this like evolved consciousness of that group, and that I think that kind of moves from like it starts with like the base level, and you kind of develop more and more complex ideas. So when you start at the beginning, subreddit, everyone just jumps down your throat without knowing the context of whatever, or the fact that we've had this conversation 100 times. And I don't know the best way to solve that. I mean, I guess it's unique to the context of what you're talking about.
Well, I think it's a function of this new way that we communicate that we've had 5-10 years to acclimate to. You know, it's going to take time before we come to realize these types of the dangers of like an echo chamber type of this new way that mentality.
Yeah, which I mean, I sent you an article.
10 years
may go acclimate to.
You know, it's going to take time.
Kind of, I have an idea of kind of what I want to do with that, but they did a study. They kind of backed up what I've seen other studies do. They found a group of left-wing people and a group of right-wing people. Which I mean, I sent you an article. Had them kind of talk about different ideas and what they would kind of want to do.
Hot button issues.
Yeah, just general policy stuff. And what they found is that the more you get a cohesive group who all agree with each other, the more quickly they become what the study term has radicalized. You get a little more extreme in your views. And online has given us this really unique opportunity to not just have that happen, but to actively seek it out, right?
And to have it happen in real time, too.
Right, and I can just choose to never interact with anyone who disagrees with me because I don't want to, and I don't have to. And I can not talk to my neighbors, I can not talk to my mailman, I can order all my shit off Amazon, and I can just sit on this forum and get more. And to have not even to the point where you do anything. Right, and I can just that's considered radical, where you're just like in this position where you're difficult to even be moderate because you're so into your idea and you have this idea of everyone matters. Right, and I can just so there's no reason to compromise.
Well, and it opens and closes new pathways of thinking is something that I found because just from spending enough time in that group, which is a pretty far left-leaning group, I would go and just about every day have political discussions with my grandfather, who's conservative. Just from and there's been times where I've got so caught up in these conversations in that group or reading, even if I'm not participating, just reading them, that just about when I go to have a discussion with my granddad, he'll be like, "Why do you feel this way?" And like we'll break it down, and I'll come through and be like, "I've got wrong." I feel it feels right because there's so many people repeating it back at me.
When you skip the, because like if you're talking about like philosophy or like really objective kind of stuff,
break it down.
There's like a method to building an argument. You have to have the foundational aspects because there's so many hammered out and established before you move on. When you skip one of the functions of the echo chamber is that we all skip past it because we all objective kind of stuff. And that's one of the funny things is that when I talk to someone, in my case, someone who's a little bit more conservative, a lot more conservative, when we go to start talking about something, they can just like as a building to the thing I was trying to get to, they can just chop it down immediately. And that's one of the funny things is that when I talk to someone where you started,
shit, well let me finish and then
oh fuck, okay. But if I was talking to someone on that Facebook group, for instance, they'd be like, well, yeah, obviously get the point, you know, and then you get so used to skipping that you forget that that's a point of contention or a point of discussion.
Well, let me finish, or that there even is a discussion to be had,
which is where then you get those really clashing points because we're both, you know, in the liberal conservative end, let's say, we're all both arguing endpoints that had different assumptions. Which makes it a useless discussion because very few people are willing to back it all the way back through. And of course, a lot of people in the liberal want to do that. They feel attacked, or depending on how you do it. This can be frustrating. You get a little snippy and have a different view. Back where we started with not getting useless discussion.
Yeah, and that's another problem with just running it back anyways. I mean, you have to have people who have the guts to challenge what is essentially a group of people, all in the same mode of thinking, in the same group think. So, I mean, it takes a lot of guts to challenge that. There's not a lot of people who want to get yelled at for hours.
I mean, online is kind of fun. It's best. Because the other thing is totally understandable. I mean, I generally get a little less aggro about it, but I've definitely been guilty of it.
It takes a lot of guts
is that some of the time when someone goes to question those fundamentals,
you
realize that I've just been watching or reading articles like kind of my off time. I don't do this full time. It's not my job. I'm not a political scientist. So when someone starts questioning it, you start to realize I don't know the answer to that. I can't prove it. You're making some good points that I don't know the validity of, and it's much easier to just get mad and call him a shithead than it is to be like, all right, well, let me go research this for a couple days. It's going to take me hours and hours to continue.
And I'll come back and the conversation's dead.
Right, and you feel embarrassed because I was making this strong point about a thing I clearly care about, and now you're making it look like I don't even know what I'm talking about. That's really common because so many of the issues.
And I'll come back and the conversation's dead.
Right, and the modern political spectrum, we're talking about healthcare. If I go to say, oh, well, I think, we should care about single payer, whatever, and someone say, like, just start running out numbers. And that may be true, maybe not, but they know a lot of numbers. I don't know any numbers, you know what I mean? Like, and now it's like, whoa, you're just attacking me because you don't care about human life, blah, 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 and then they're like, well, like, I'm just trying to say, I think it's different with numbers. That may be true, maybe not.
Exactly.
But, now I don't know any numbers, you know what I mean?
But that's why it's so important to have those conversations, though, because, like, I've seen, specifically with the graphs and the fake news and all that type of bullshit, there's been times where I've gone to have a conversation with our affiliate, or I guess you would call it, and have those conversations, though, because, like, I've seen, dude we know, over at Polytech, Alex, is, I'll go to talk to him about something about healthcare, and take something that appears to me to be, or I guess you would call it, complete, like, just true, like, it just seems like it's so grounded in fact, and here's an article that says it, whatever, and then it'll go, oh, but did you look at this? And take something, no, I didn't, and then it turns out that either I'm completely wrong, or there are two sides to this argument, one of which I've never heard, so I never had to have that conversation in my head, and consider that information.
Or with our modern issues,
it turns out that either
sourcing and ability, maybe one of these articles is wrong, maybe two sides to either way,
one of which I've never
explains why we have
so I never had to have that conversation in my head, and consider that. But that's why it's so important to have conversations with these people, and that's the one thing I love about Alex is he will sit down and have a conversation with him, and he's got well thought out points, and we disagree with him on, I think, most issues.
I mean, at least some part of it.
Yeah, exactly. But we can still sit down and have a conversation, and that's good for him. Exactly. It's good for him, and it's good for us, and that's the type of thing we're starting to see less and less of, and I feel like that contributes to the polarization and the extremism that's coming out more and more. I mean, it is coming from the web to real life, and that is why you're starting to see situations like the shooter at the baseball practice. They just went and shot up Republicans. That's extremism. That is coming out. And Dan Carlin did a fantastic podcast. I love the guy. He's so fucking smart. He's always one step ahead. You're starting to see situations exactly right. But he was talking about how these people on either side, the guy that slipped into people's throats, that were protecting the Muslim girls or whatever, and then the guy who shot up the baseball field. These are the canaries in the coal mine for our society. These are the people that give us a warning, like a red flag, and say, hey, we've got a problem here, and if this gets any worse, it's going to get more prevalent. We'll have people who are less extreme doing these extremist type of actions, and I think that is a function of this type of refusal of anybody to actually give credence to the other person's argument. It's this right versus left, and no one wants to have a conversation anymore, and it seems to me that it's always been bad, but it seems to me like it's actually getting worse.
What I think is not helpful is something I'm seeing in online
it's this right versus
and you see it a little bit on like
conversation, and it seems to me that like it's always been bad.
There's this like collective straw man that becomes built, you know, of like on the thing we're talking about. I see a lot of, and not that these people don't exist, but it becomes like representative of every conservative is like definitely racist to varying degrees. There's this like definitely wants to like give guns to children, not necessarily express that explicitly, but you see it built up where like this is what conservatives are like, and I can see where when you do that for long enough, you build that image up in your head. It's effectively like wartime propaganda, where all of a sudden the communists aren't like people with different ideology, they're monsters with like children, and you gotta be careful, never let them get an inch, you know, like all that kind of shit.
You see that with the fellow that came back from North Korea and then died immediately after. There was a professor who's recently been fired because she got on a Facebook group and said this is just typical of these you see that with the overprivileged, but
I know
these privileged white people who don't have any sense. Exactly, and it's like, is it lost on you that that's a kid? Man, his frontal cortex is not fully formed.
Well, and
he's 20.
Maybe I'm
these
getting
privileged white people don't have any sense. Exactly, and it's like, is it lost on you that that's a kid? Man, his frontal cortex is not
talking to
fully
police officers about it. The guy who was on the trip with me said like maybe he did that, like stole the poster or whatever. But the guy was saying that that would have been insanely out of character. He never talked about doing that. Like, never did anything close to doing that. And I don't think he was the guy who's alone long enough away from me to do it without me knowing. I don't understand. So to then jump on the fact that he died was make it a cause of overpayment. White people is like,
and what she was saying is that like I don't want to take this out of context, but I'm going to. So what he was saying was she was saying was essentially that, I mean, he probably raped some girls because that's what typical white frat guys do. He's probably a misogynist, so fuck him, you know. And it's like, how are you? That's exactly what you're talking about. Straw man. She sees him as a white privileged straw man.
When she has this idea already,
exactly. So she attributes that to him. When she realistically, I mean, she was his professor, so she knew something about him, but she didn't know it. She sees him as a white
doing anything like that. You know, she has this idea already.
Exactly.
I don't know. That seems really bizarre.
Yeah, that too. When she realistically, I mean, she was. Well, I think it was a personal Facebook page. So
maybe. Still dumb.
But definitely dumb, and she got fired for it. So whatever.
Exactly. Like that. But no, hang on. We might have.
Exactly.
I don't know. That seems really bizarre.
Yeah, that too. When she realistically, I mean, she was. Well, I think it was a personal Facebook page. So
maybe. Still dumb.
Definitely dumb, and she got fired for it.
Thank you, Alec. Let's see if we can get this fixed.
You think we could get like one of those bank tubes that goes directly to YouTube?
I think we need it.
Yeah.
Or a big truck or something. Okay, hopefully this doesn't actually end. Let's see. All right, can you still hear us? All right, we're gonna roll through here and see.
So whatever.
Doing anything like that. No, hang on. We might have.
Exactly.
I don't know. That seems really bizarre.
Yeah, that too.
This podcast in the future, you can expect.
Yeah.
All right, can you still hear us? All right.
All right.
Sweet.
Back in business.
Back in business. So what I wanted to talk about, and I think this is another thing I wanted to tie in, like I was saying previously, to that radicalization article I was reading. Which for those of you who may have been on the live video, it was where the audio was fucking up. It was an article about how basically they were showing yet again something we kind of know, but a little bit more objectively know now, that if you put groups of people with really similar ideologies together, they kind of develop more radical kind of ideas and expand very quickly farther into their own sector of the ideology they have, very prevalently with political ideologies, right? That makes sense. But there was another article I was reading that I want to do some more research on and get some names from it, but just kind of throw out there to see what you think of it, because I thought it was pretty interesting. He was talking about how there was like the previous guard of like intellectuals. It was like Noam Chomsky and people like that, like very, complex ideas, thoughtful in like nuanced ways with ideas that aren't singular. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they were saying that because the super rich, and this is maybe a bit of a simplification of the article, but that's fine, because the super rich have wanted to have these like think tanks and powerful political figures and YouTubers and things like that they kind of fund those. And so what we've got now is this new class of intellectual that's much more powerful because they have singular visions of the world they can pull everything through and pull you into, right? So I haven't finished the article or done any research on it, like I said, but what it kind of reminds me of is like the church revivals of the South, right? Where it's not, you have this monolith of the Catholic Church or the Church of England or whatever they've gone to where you've got philosophers who are just Catholic philosophers. All they do is think about the Bible and figure out different ways to make it kind of fit with the changing times. And then you've got like a Southern Baptist preacher who he's a great public speaker. He's got the fire and brimstone thing. He's going to pull you in with the hook of what he's got. Yeah. And he doesn't have the complex ideology of Christianity to the extent that some people do. He's got a better thing. He can draw the public in with that, and that this new class might be...
Well, and he can kind of jump to conclusions a bit and keep you with him to where you don't fully logically think out the whole thing.
You don't
step
need
by
to
step.
if he's good enough, you know? And I just thought that was really interesting and something it makes sense, right? Like you see it even on like smaller level, right? With like Alex Jones is a great example. Like, not that he's an intellectual, but he pulls you with a singular ideology that you just like get dragged along for the ride. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, and once you sign on to that ideology and you say, okay, yes, I agree, there's a conspiracy on this level, then it's easier to logically jump to, okay, well, if this is the case, then that's also the case. And if this is the case, then that's also the case. And before you know it, you're so far down the rabbit hole that when somebody challenges your first initial idea, you're like, oh, no, that's old school. Like, we're past that. You know? And because that's the case, everything else makes sense too.
As long as you stay on the train.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing I think, and this is the reason I want to do the research on it, is I feel like there's an argument to be made that not only with liberal values or conservative values, but with really specific issues like feminism or racism, you definitely see on occasion, and I don't have specific examples because I want to find good ones, so it doesn't sound like I'm just like being shitty, but when you pull your worldview into looking for things like that, you see them because they're there and they're
it's kind of like
more
the secret,
obvious. But then every once in a while you hit like little things that make someone else say that's ridiculous, and you're like, bullshit, because I've got this whole thing that is all true, is all justified, and this one fits in line with it. You know what I mean? And I think that's why you get a bit more of the fracturing, right? Is because when you've pulled yourself through like the page we were talking about, this liberal but like libertarian idea that like it's a systematic government, or a Republican really, or GOP even more than Republican, I guess, like gerrymandering and voter repression to make minorities especially, but also poor white people into more of the lower class and concentrate wealth. All of a sudden everything's an example of that. And there are examples of that. Not everything is. Sometimes it's just a crazy Oklahoma lawmaker who wants to satisfy his base and he's not going to do anything with it. You know what I mean?
But when you look at it through that lens, it's easy to see a tint of that on everything.
Well, and because there's value in doing it, right? Because you'll see stuff that is there that needed to be seen, but sometimes you'll go a little bit beyond, right? And you were looking for it and it was there, but it wasn't quite what you thought it was, or it wasn't for the reason you thought it was. An example I can give actually is recently there was an article I read about I think it was New York maybe, hair braider. And hair braiding is like more typical of African American communities because it's just like the way you do that kind of hair. It's very specific and it's something anyone can do, right? Anyone who's practiced it and knows what they're doing. But it requires a license in almost every state. And they were saying that's unfair. It's oppression of minority people. It's just trying to keep poor black women poor. This is something they could do on the side to make money, and the white people don't want to let them do it, right? Which sounds fair. Like, that's something that's happened before. Exactly.
Unless there is another side to that argument, I would agree with.
That's what I looked up and found out that if you study licensing requirements on trades from the beginning of it in the United States up till now, the only correlation you can find when you factor out certain details, when you factor out no details other than just account for like age, marital status, where you live, that kind of thing, it's almost always a positive or zero effect on minority representation in the workforce of those fields, right?
Yeah.
So either more black people and Hispanic people and whatever can get in, more women can get in, or it's the same amount.
Yeah.
And then with the few things that had a negative correlation, when you factor out older people of that, like when it was just coming in, right? So those are people who were unlikely to decide, fine, I'll go get licensed. They just decide, fuck it, I'm not doing it. When you factor those people out, you still get a positive representation or no increase. So what it ends up being is, yes, this looks bad from the story of this one woman who did depend on this and didn't need the government coming after her. But overall, licensing requirements are positive effect on minority representation in the workforce,
Yes.
which is counterintuitive in my opinion. That's not what I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly.
And not what you kind of hear about more like with voter registration. Those are generally specifically aimed for that, right? Or at least you can make the argument that even if you won't say that it's specific, it was. Like, that's what you were doing. But I just thought that was interesting. That's the kind of thing where good on people for paying attention to it, looking out for those details, but be aware that that's not always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience.
Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. Right. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on.
Sure.
Which is, it's like
always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience.
Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on.
Sure.
Which is, it's like
always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience.
Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on.
Sure.
Which is, it's like
always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience.
Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on.
Sure.
Which is, it's like
always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience.
Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on. Which is, it's like always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience. Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because it may on its face look like that, but like you said, once you listen to someone else's opinion and analysis, you may change your mind. And that's kind of the problem. That what I wanted to kind of tie this to is our experience with that and echo chambers and that type of thing. And also, it's kind of the same thing that goes hand in hand with the social justice warrior type of movement we're seeing going on. Which is, it's like always as much the case just because it lines up with your previous experience. Well, that's why it's so important to have conversation with people. That's why you can't shut people down, because thanks again, Alex. For,
no, I appreciate you looking out, because if I keep
let's see if he can even hear us.
That would be
It's like always as much the case just because it lines up with your.
That's a different one, though. Let's make sure these chords. That's a different one, though.
all right.
We good?
Let's wait for the feedback.
Let's make sure these chords.
I don't know what the fuck that is.
I wonder if it's just the live feed, and if we go back.
I think it
afterwards-
is.
yeah.
It always is. I just don't know why that's happening. It's something about, I think our mics are feeding into, instead of going out of speakers or intending to, they're going back into the mixer for some reason, but I don't know where that setting is because it's weird because it takes a minute to get to that point. All right, you want to just cut this off and either restart it or...
We good?
Yeah, just restart.
Let's.
All right.
Hopefully that'll fix it.